Thank you. I'm very glad to be here. This is the first presentation I've done on the East Lauderdale Historical Society, so y'all bear with me. I have been working in history, as he said, for quite some time, and it's a passion of my mother's. And she's really a genealogist at heart, but that kind of led into local history and how all of her people coming into the area of East Lauderdale County. So that's where my passion is in East Lauderdale. And like he said, the East Lauderdale Historical Society was actually established in late 2011, but really got formed and going pretty well in 2012. And we've had 21 markers installed so far. We meet at the Rogersville Senior Citizens Building on the third Thursday of each month, except for December. The first marker that we installed was actually near and dear to my heart, and it was the one for the Elgin Crossroads area. And it's installed behind the Shell station there at the intersection of 101 and 72 near the Methodist Church. And of course, Elgin's located right there at that same intersection, right in the heart of what was Doubleheads Reserve, which ran from Elk River to Cypress Creek, 10 miles north from the Tennessee River. One of my ancestors, Gabe Butler, was there in the early 1800s. His name is found on the 1810 petition against removal of the white settlers. Elgin had other names, had Marmion, Ingram's Crossroads, Crittenden's Crossroads, Elgin Crossroads, and Elgin. Most of us locals still call it Elgin Crossroads or just Crossroads. There's still a business there that's maintained that name, and it's called Crossroads Pharmacy. The first post office was named Marmion in 1836. It was renamed Ingram's in 1849 and Elgin in 1901, and it closed in 1905. So there's not been a post office there in a long time. During the Civil War, the area was known as Ingram's Crossroads and served as a recruiting station for the Confederate soldiers. There was an elementary school there up until 1985 when it was torn down. I went there, and there was a teacher there. Her name was Miss Olita Tays, and she loved history herself. And whenever the school was torn down, she preserved the lunchroom in the gymnasium area, and that's what's now the Elgin Senior Citizen Center. So I give thanks to her. She taught at that school for 40 years. And another little tidbit, she started teaching at Frog Pond in Lauderdale County, and if anybody knows where Frog Pond is, it's on County Road 33 near the Pleasant Valley Church of Christ. The next marker we installed was for the Springfield community, and as you will find, most people that do historical markers, they'll put the same information on each side of the marker, but we've never done one like that. There's too much information to get out there, so we put something different on each side, and sometimes we'll label it different, such as the case with this one. You got the Springfield community on one side and the Springfield Church and School on the other side. So on the Springfield community, it's installed in front of the Springfield Cumberland Presbyterian Church on Highway 101, just north of the County Road 76 intersection. And it's among some of the earliest settlements in Lauderdale County, and it was once considered as the county seat. The name derived from the many springs in the area, and these fresh waters attracted early settlers to the area, and early in the Civil War, this area served as a training ground since the water was so plentiful. And I'm just giving a little brief overview. I'm not reading it word for word, just pulling out some important parts, just so you'll kind of know a little bit about each one of them. And on the back side, the Springfield Church and School. This one is interesting, though. In the late 1800s, the first church was located about 2.5 miles from that location where the marker is. And the church was named White's Chapel and also served as a school. In 1908, it was moved to Springfield. Prior to that, though, here's a free story. It's not on this marker. I have an ancestor. His name is Charles G. Butler, and he was a writer. And so he wrote actually 3 or 4 different writings that we have copies of, and I'm sure he wrote several that we don't. But in one of his writings, he talked about Frank James was actually teaching at the White's Chapel while Jesse was scouting out for his famous payroll robbery at the mouth of Blue Water, the canal, to pay the canal workers. So I always thought that was interesting. Back to the Springfield School, there was a school there that was operated in the church building in 1913. A school was later built just north of the church in 1926. It closed in 1960. But my mother and my grandfather attended that school. And something that I always found interesting about that school is Mom said that while she was going there, they actually dug up under the school and dug out a basement to make a lunchroom. I always thought that was interesting how they would do that. It's like, how did the building not fall down? And then the county home extension office would come there. There was a little building up behind the school, and they would give classes there, and they taught people how to make cotton mattresses, preserve food, and other things. Nothing's left there now but the memories. The school's been torn down. It's just grass now. The next marker that we did was for General Hugh Pate Harris. And this marker is located at Anderson Park in Anderson, Alabama on Highway 207. He was born in 1909 at the north edge of town. He moved to Lawrence County, Tennessee. His family moved to Lawrence County, Tennessee shortly after that in his young years. He attended the Columbia Military Academy and then West Point, graduating in 1931. He was promoted to 4-star general on March the 1st, 1964. He was the 66th officer to obtain this rank. He retired in 1965 and became the president of the Citadel, the military college of South Carolina. He died on November the 3rd, 1979, and was buried in the Arlington Cemetery. More information on General Harris can be found in Lawrenceburg, Tennessee, at the Old Jail Museum. If you've not been, it's a world of information, a lot of great things they've collected there. So it's, and it did serve as an old jail. They claim him as their hero too. General Harris is also on the Walk of Honor at the River Heritage Park in Florence. They're located in the Marriott complex. I mean, who knew we had a 4-star general born in our Quad Cities area? Okay, the next one we installed was the, now how did that happen? It didn't look like that when I saved it. Sorry. The next one we put up was for the Rogersville Presbyterian Church in the USA. It's located in Rogersville on Lee Street across from the old Liberty Cemetery. And it's just west of the Highway 207 intersection. The earliest church in the area was a brush arbor located in the old Liberty Cemetery. A building was later built there where several faiths worshiped. And I'm going to read these names, and it's going to sound like you're going, why? But I'll tell you when I get done. Thomas Davenport was the first one on this tenants in common deed that they did in October 12th of 1848. He was the trustee for the Methodist Episcopal Church South. Anderson P. Neely, trustee for the Cumberland Presbyterian Church. Daniel P. Haraway, trustee for the Continental Presbyterian Church. Jonathan M. Cunningham, trustee for the Benevolent Division of the number 17 Sons of Temperance. And Peter F. Patrick, trustee for the Freemasons. So I'm sure during that period of time, they had to have all of those organizations there to be able to pitch in to build a nice structure. The church building that's they're standing now was built in 1889 after the first two-story burned, and the Presbyterian Church in the USA worshiped there until 1974. And I'm thankful that there's local residents in the community of Rogersville that tries to keep that building up. I know Morris Lentz is one of the main members that tries to maintain it. And then Rogersville also has like a Yule log ceremony there at Christmas time. So I think that's kind of neat to keep the history and the spirit alive at that church. Then the next one we had installed was at the Lauderdale County High School. It was established in 1912. It's located on College Street at the school. Prior to 1912, a school was in the area. It was a 2-story white frame building. On October the 7th, 1907, an act was passed by the Alabama legislature to establish state high schools in the county. Rogersville had to submit plans to have 5 acres and a building deeded to the state. Governor Emmett O'Neal visited in October of 1911 and assured the community that the high school would be built there. So it opened September the 10th of 1912 with 112 students. It was first named Rogersville High School and later renamed Lauderdale County High School. And by 2013, LCHS had presented diplomas to approximately 6,500 graduates. One thing that I found interesting about the history of this high school is that since it was the very first one in Lauderdale County, Lauderdale is such a long county. And if these students wanted to go to school there, they didn't have these fast automobiles back then. So the residents of Rogersville would offer these students room and board to stay there to go to high school. So I found that interesting. Okay, the next one that we have is the town of Anderson, 1825. It's located at Anderson Park on Highway 207. Actually, it and the Hugh Pate Harris markers are installed side by side at that park. James Anderson settled a mile south of Anderson in 1818, and the earliest permanent settlement was a mile north of the present town of Anderson on Anderson Creek. Booker Foster arrived there from Virginia in 1825, and in 1835 he built his home and a water mill on Anderson Creek. Jess Williams built the first cotton gin in the area of Foster's Mill. The Anderson Post Office was established in 1860 with A.D. Ray as the postmaster. Anderson's first church was Hurricane Springs Primitive Baptist Church. It was first a brush arbor, like most of the churches got started, but it was at what now is called the Anderson Cemetery there. It's just a little bit north of where the marker is. Graves there date back to 1841. The Farmers Bank, built here in 1926, and Anderson was incorporated in 1973 with W.S. Turpin as mayor. The first school was here in 1910 and named Howard. It accommodated students from Hammond and Union schools. Later, other schools in the area closed, and so that created the growth of the little Anderson Junior High School. And sadly, though, the junior high school closed in 2011 and the elementary school closed in 2014, and that building is now used as an event center. The next one that we installed was the Samuel Burney marker. He was born in 1763 and died in 1849. He was a Revolutionary War veteran. This one is located at First Creek on the north side of Highway 72. That's my least favorite location of a marker because it sits so far off of the highway. But Highway 72's path has changed several times, and there was so much asphalt and hard rock material that we couldn't get a hole dug to put a marker closer, so it sits off to the side. So if you ever see that one, please pull over there and read that one. He was born on January the 30th, 1763 in Gulfport County, North Carolina. He was one of 17 known Revolutionary War veterans to settle in the area that became Lauderdale County. He moved to this location in 1808 and leased 1,600 acres from Chief Doublehead. And after being evicted by soldiers at Fort Hampton in 1811, they returned and purchased land here in 1818. He was a farmer and a justice of the peace. He died in 1849 and is believed to be buried in the old Liberty Cemetery. And then the second side to this marker is Burney Creek, First Creek, Wheeler Lake. What is now First Creek was known at as Burney's Creek. When you look at the old maps, it will show Burney's Creek. And that was, of course, for Samuel and his family. We don't know exactly when it changed over to First Creek, but we have a feeling that it had something to do with the canal system, because you got Lock 1 and Lock 2, which is for Second Creek. So it's as good a guess as any. Before the construction of the dams, the water dropped 137 feet over a distance of 37 miles from Browns Ferry to Florence. And the first canal opened in 1836 and closed in 1838. The second canal was 14 and a half miles long with 9 locks and opened in 1890. Lock 1 was located at the mouth of Burney's Creek, which is First Creek. Okay, the next one that we installed was for Covington, Second Creek, the Wheeler Reservoir, and Good Springs Church. It's located at Second Creek on Highway 72. And if you're on Highway 72 going like from coming from Florence going toward Rogersville, it's on the left right before you go across that bridge. And that was a difficult one for us to install also. The man that we got to drill a hole for that one broke his auger there because it's just nothing but solid rock right there in that mound. And when I was growing up, we always called it the Indian Mound. I have no idea whether it has anything to do with Indians or not. I don't know where that came from, but some people you'll hear refer to that area as the Indian Mound. There was a thriving community here along the north bank. So if you're looking at that sign, you turn north, it's that community was kind of in that northern direction on the bank there. And come on into where the water is, because the waters came in and flooded it, so they had to evacuate. But there was quite a community there at that time. It had stores and churches, and the bridge at that time would go from where Covington was over to the boat launch there at Second Creek. That's where the original bridge was. So then when the dams, the water backed up, then they moved the bridge to join where that creates that long causeway there now that we have today. All right, and then the next one is Center Star. It's located on Highway 72 in front of the First Baptist Church, Center Star. Center Star was spelled Center, C-E-N-T-R-E, Star, into the 1900s. The name evolved from the U.S. Postal Service, which served the remote areas by star routes. So the post office there was at the center of the star route, so that's where it got its name, Center Star. Settlers arrived there as early in the 1800s, like most of the other areas there. It had rich soil and was farmed first by the Indians and later by plantation owners. Some of the more well-known plantations there was the Phillips, Taylor, Cunningham, Douglas, and Williams. Other communities in the area there is Bellevue, Big Oak, and Houstontown. The oldest active Methodist congregation there first organized in 1818 at the mouth of Blue Water Creek, and then moved there in 1893 and was renamed Driscoll's Chapel. Later renamed Center Star Methodist Church. Now, the nice thing is that we did not do the marker that's in front of that church now, but Mr. Pettis did. So I'm glad the history of that church also has a historical marker. It had been there for many, many years, and just recently we sent it off to have it refurbished. So it looks really nice now, so you can go by there and read that one. Also here, the Center Star is where Captain Edward A. O'Neill organized his Calhoun Guard, later designated Company I, 9th Alabama Infantry Regiment. O'Neill was promoted to Brigadier General and later became Governor of Alabama. Center Star had a school in 1965. Allen Thornton Trade School opened here in 1967. Center Star was once a thriving business community with general merchandise stores, sauer mill, blacksmith shop, grist mill, cotton gin, and doctor's offices. The next two, we actually have two markers for the Mitchelltown community. When we started working on this one, we felt like it would be best to have a marker out on the highway because more people would see it. But the residents of Mitchelltown really wanted one in the heart of their community. And so they saved up the money and bought their own. So I'll go ahead and tell you now how we pay for our markers is with the TVA in lieu of tax monies, and we file for grant money through the Lauderdale County Commission. That's how we've paid for all of our markers. But there's been a couple that paid for their own, and this is one of them. So even though we have two markers for Mitchelltown, they each have a little bit different information on them. So I would definitely go look at both of them if you have time. The first one is located in front of the Elkins East Chapel there on Highway 72, and that road that goes down beside Elkins is what local residents know as Mitchelltown Road. It's County Road 33, but if you're born and raised there, you just know it as Mitchelltown Road. Mitchelltown was located on County Road 33 in and around the intersections of County Road 76 and 50. Jack Phillips lived there where the East Chapel is now, and he operated a mill there on Mill Creek. And other settlers in the area were Hurstons, Joiners, and Wilsons. John Robert Mitchell joined Captain O'Neill's Calhoun Guard at Center Star and was promoted to captain. Captain Mitchell later married Edna Caroline Phillips, Jack Phillips's daughter, and they settled there. And so Mitchelltown is named for him, and because he lived there. They're buried in a cemetery just south of just north of that marker, Phillips Cemetery. There was a school there that operated in 1836, and it later moved to Dog Branch. And my grandfather went to Dog Branch School. I always thought that was so odd when I was growing up and he was talking about going to Dog Branch School. But it's right there in Mitchelltown. There was also a major business complex right along Mill Creek there. And there was a merchandise store, grist mill, blacksmith shop, sawmill, cotton gin until 1916. And then the cotton gin stood until it collapsed in 1960. And I've heard people that are residents of that community say they heard it when it collapsed. I always thought that was interesting. And then the second marker kind of talks about some more of the residents that was in that area, and also Clarence Hurston. He ran the cotton gin and the sawmill there until it closed in 1950. Some family names noted there were Joyner, Steens, Holden, Ray, Collier, Tate, Jackson, Walton, Scott, Hurston, and Butler. The last business that was there was a minnow hatchery, and it closed in the 1960s. Captain Mitchell and his wife, I was telling you about that. But Shannon Phillips, he does a lot with that cemetery. So that's a really old cemetery there if you have time to go visit it. The next one we did was for Lambs Ferry Road. It's located in front of the Rogersville Town Hall and the fire department there on Highway 207. There were two major Indian trails that ran through there, the Sipsey Trail and the East-West Trail. They intersected there, and the trail was widened for wagon use and led from present-day Spring Hill, Tennessee, through Pulaski and Minor Hill to the Tennessee River. John Lamb, a Scots-Irish Cherokee, relocated there from Indian Creek in Giles County, Tennessee, around 1809. He established a ferry, and the road later became Lambs Ferry Road. For 100 years, Lambs Ferry was a major crossing on the Tennessee River. During the Civil War, Union and Confederate soldiers used that crossing. And when Wheeler Dam was built in 1936, of course, that ferry ceased in operation. The road south of the intersection really is what's called Lambs Ferry Road. The road north of that intersection is pretty much Highway 207. And the next one is for the famous Jesse James gang. It's located on Highway 72 in front of the Blue Water Equipment Company. It's where the intersection for County Road 33 that runs south is at. A lot of people don't realize we have Jesse James history here, but we do. During the construction of the second canal system, on March 11, 1861, Jesse James and his gang robbed the payroll master, Alexander G. Smith. Mr. Smith was headed to pay the workers at the mouth of Blue Water. He had $5,293.18 on him. And so when the gang stopped him, they robbed him of the payroll money and his watch. He was forced to go with the gang into Tennessee, where they let him go, and they returned his watch. I thought that was nice of them. And then later on the other side, we talk about the trial of Frank James. The federal district attorney in Huntsville collected evidence against the major suspects in the Muscle Shoals Canal robbery. Jesse James was killed by Robert Ford in 1862, so he didn't have to stand trial. William Ryan was one of the gang members, and he was imprisoned in Missouri. Dick Liddell, another one of the gang, was brought to Huntsville and found guilty. Then they brought Frank James along. He was arrested in Missouri and brought to Huntsville for trial. The defense attorney was Leroy Pope Walker, a popular Alabama lawyer, a former Confederate general, and Secretary of War. Frank James was acquitted and walked out a free man and lived until 1915. Some of the readings I've found said that when he walked out, there was a group of people there that cheered him on. Like they were so happy he got released. There's a lot of information I found on an unusual place. We don't really talk about the Alabama Gen Web much anymore, but at algenweb.org website, there's the whole story is there. All right, the next one was for Wheeler Dam, 1936. It's installed on Highway 101, just on the north side of the dam. There's a little parking area there, and that's where that one is installed. Wheeler Dam is located 275 miles above the mouth of the Tennessee River at Paducah, Kentucky. It is one of 9 dams on the Tennessee River operated by TVA. This one has a lot of detail in it. Wheeler was the first built by the TVA after Franklin D. Roosevelt created the Tennessee Valley Authority in January of 1933. Wheeler was completed on November the 9th, 1936, and is named after General Joseph Wheeler. And then the second side is about the Wheeler Reservoir and Locks, 1936. Wheeler forms one of 9 reservoirs that creates a 652-mile stairway of navigable water from Paducah, Kentucky to Knoxville. TVA purchased 103,400 acres of land for the reservoir. A total of 31,228 acres had to be cleared and required removal of 840 families and 176 graves, and the relocation of 30 miles of roadway. Now, something I wanted to add here was the story about the Saturn rockets. Y'all probably already know that story. It's where they were bringing the Saturn rocket down the Tennessee River, and they were building a second lock on at Wheeler Dam, and the lock broke. So they were unable to lock the Saturn rocket through, so they had to get creative. And they built a loading dock on the east side of Wheeler Dam, where they offloaded that rocket onto trucks and trucked it across Highway 101, then down to the lower side, and they had another loading dock down there built, loaded it onto another barge, and they were on their way. Now, that sounds like an easy feat, but I'm sure it took quite some time for them to figure that out. I found the full story on that at nasa.gov, so if you ever want to go. That was in 1961, I think. Yeah, 1961. Then the next marker we installed was for the East End High School. It was an operation from 1952 to 1967. It's installed on County Road 610 in Rogersville, and if you're familiar with that area, it's called Lover's Lane. There used to be a park there, and they had named it Lover's Lane Park. But since then, that property has been sold, and it's no longer a park, but the people that bought it told us that we didn't have to move the marker, and we was glad of that. The East End High School was the first high school for African-American students in eastern Lauderdale County. Prior to this, there was a junior and senior high school. Students were bused to Burrell High School in Florence. The school is located on the south side of Lover's Lane with 17 acres of land. Built in 1952 for grades 1 through 12 with William M. Ford as principal. In 1954, there were 178 students in all grades. Over the years, there were 213 graduates. In 1965, a plan was put into place to start integrating all the grades in the school system, beginning with the 65-66 school year. 7 former East End students graduated from LCHS in 1966. The campus was sold in 1969, and the buildings were demolished in 2016. The nice thing about this, too, is they now have a marker for West End High School. There was a West End High School for the blacks, and that was the East End High School for the blacks. So I'm glad they were able to get that history mark there, too. The next one was for Gabriel Butler, Old Gabe. And it's located at the end of County Road 421 at the Butler Cemetery. And if you're going, again, from Florence to Rogersville, right before you get to Elgin and the polo fields, right before you get to that where the bridge is, there's a road that turns right before you cross that bridge to the left. And you will go all the way to the end of that road, and that's Butler Cemetery. And this marker is located right there. He was born in the Carolinas in 1779. He married his first wife, Sarah Whitesides, in Warren County, Kentucky on December the 26th, 1803. Gabe found his way to North Alabama and leased land from, guess who? Good old Chief Doublehead. And after Doublehead was killed, the government was forcing settlers to leave Doublehead's reserve. Gabe's name is found on a petition asking for the white settlers to leave. He was forced to leave in 1811 and migrated north into Tennessee. He returned and purchased land where he was leasing, and he built his home near what he was hoping would be an area where the Florence-Huntsville Road would be built. But he missed it by about a mile and a half. There's numerous people living in Lauderdale County that are descendants of old Gabe, including myself. And he and his family is located is buried in that cemetery in a limestone block wall. Next one, we've already mentioned this one, is Liberty Church in the Liberty Cemetery. It's located on Lee Street, just west of that 207 intersection. Liberty Church began as a brush arbor in the area of the current Liberty Cemetery around 1818. It was constructed of, just like we all know, posts and limbs and leaves used for covering. Richard Andrews was said to have held the first services there. And there was a small log structure that replaced the brush arbor in 1831, and they became part of the Flint River Primitive Baptist Church Association in Madison County. This was the only church in Rogersville prior to 1841. In 1850, there were 112 members, led by Reverend Jesse Seal, who served at the Round Island Church in Limestone County. I don't know if you all have heard, but they have put a new marker up for Round Island Church. I was listening to the news and it caught my ear. I haven't been over there yet, but I really want to go over there because evidently it holds a lot of history for that area. And then the church was burned in 1865. There was no pastor at the time, so another church was never rebuilt. The missionary Baptist then revivals were held near here through the 1900s. And then Liberty Cemetery is located there. It has at least 200 people are believed to be buried there. These are the citizens that helped form Rogersville into the community it is today. The namesake Andrew Rogers, his last name was spelled Rodgers. So the community of Rogersville was spelled Rodgersville for many years. Of course, now they've dropped the D, but it was really named after this gentleman. His daughter Margaret and her husband Robert Shane have monuments there within a limestone wall. The earliest known grave was a 2-year-old William Lansford, who died on September the 17th, 1837. The next one that we did was for Elk River Shoals. And it's installed on Highway 72, just on the west side of the Elk River Bridge. And the Elk River flows into the Tennessee River approximately 4 miles from that location. And that is the easternmost point of a massive underwater formation which was exposed until the early 1900s. This rocky formation consisted of 3 major sections: the Elk River Shoals, the Big Muscle Shoals, and the Little Muscle Shoals, collectively known as the Muscle Shoals. You all know that. You've got a book on it back there. But we went ahead and described it in the marker as again, that within a distance of 37 miles from Browns Ferry to Florence, the vertical fall in the river was 137 feet. And this made the Tennessee River practically unnavigable. The first Muscle Shoals Canal was built in 1836 by the state of Alabama and consisted of 17 locks along the north side of the river. It was abandoned in 1838 primarily because of the Elk River Shoals. So then later they built the second canal in 1875 and added 2 more locks on the south side of the river. So that way that took care of that problem. And something interesting about that area too is General Joe Wheeler crossed here approximately with 4,000 Confederate soldiers. When he got on the other side, that's when he found his sweetheart. The second canal opened in 1890 and continued until Wilson Dam was completed in 1926, I think. Later, Wheeler Dam began 15 miles east of Wilson, and Wheeler was completed in 1936. Then the Muscle Shoals the shoals were completely covered at that point, and people could navigate the waters. Okay, the next one is for early history of Lexington, 1818. this marker is located at the A.L. Phillips Park, which is just north of the current town hall. And it's along the road that goes down into an area which is now softball fields, right on the Mill Creek. The presence of freshwater springs north of there attracted early settlers. Thomas Gresham, a Revolutionary War veteran, settled west of there prior to 1810, purchased land in 1818. His brother John, also a veteran of the war, purchased land there in 1818. Another veteran, Benjamin French, settled there. A marker is located on County Road 136, east of 640 in Lexington, for Benjamin French. The forerunner of Lexington was called Dugout, and it was because there were shallow caves dug into the side of where the second creek ran. They would dig out these little caves so they could stay until they could get a home built. And so they called that area Dugout. And there was a mill there run by Edward Poteet. He was also a Revolutionary War soldier. Other communities in the area were Portertown, Bluewater Creek, and Cotton Gin. Some believe the town got its name from Lexington, Massachusetts, because of the local ties to the American Revolution. The next one that we installed was the First Baptist Church of Rogersville, and there was a Reverend James arrived there in 1820. He was a traveling minister, so his job was to go to different communities and start churches. So he held his first services near his home, which was near Lambs Ferry, and in a building that also served as a school. When that building burned, then he moved his house and the church on up into Rogersville. And that marker is located right in front of the First Baptist Church of Rogersville there on College Street, not far from the school. And then a frame church building was completed in 1842, and in 1865, the Baptist, the Methodist, Presbyterian, and the Church of Christ met there over the next 25 years. In 1906, the Rogersville Baptist Church was organized and joined the Lauderdale Baptist Association. The current sanctuary was completed in 1992. We have done several churches just because they were very historical in the area. So the next one was the Mount Pleasant Baptist Church. This one's located on the what we call the Old Florence and Lexington Highway, County Road 71, about 4 miles south of Lexington, at the church there. It was established on November the 30th in 1854 in a local home with several members, and then they moved to a building on McClure Springs, which you cannot drive to anymore. And they built a building that was 40 by 25, 40 foot by 25 foot. And the local folks nicknamed it Old Scrouge Out. My mom had talked about this church when I was growing up. I thought it was crazy, Old Scrouge Out, because it was so small that they, I guess, had to stand outside if you didn't get there in time to get a seat. The church later relocated, of course, to its current location, and it was originally part of the Liberty Baptist Association, later becoming a charter member of the Colbert Lauderdale Baptist Association in 1932. There was a school located near that church. It was called Williams School, and it operated from the 1890s until the early 1940s. Mount Pleasant Cemetery is also located there at the church on property donated by Steth Williams, S-T-E-T-H. I had the historical marker manufacturing plant call me and say, "Is that correct? Is that the way you spell his name?" That's the way it is, S-T-E-T-H. And also someone very famous is buried in that cemetery, and it's U.S. Army Special 4th Class Don Leslie Michael. He is a Vietnam War Congressional Medal of Honor recipient. He was born in Lexington, July the 31st of 1947, and died a hero on April the 8th, 1967, at the age of 19. This is our 22nd marker that is on order, and it will not be here. They said they are 6 months behind now. We used to get them within 6 to 8 weeks, but not now. They're telling us 6 months. This is a marker we felt like needed to be done. It will be located at the entrance to the Joe Wheeler Resort area, and it is for Camp Drake. It was a Boy Scout camp in Joe Wheeler State Park Negro area. That was the only state park for the black people in the state of Alabama there. And the people, when they started looking for an area to put that park, when they came to Rogersville and was looking, they found all the people to be so nice, they decided to put it there. When you enter the main road going into the park, there's a real sharp curve to the left, and that park area was pretty much right there. When you come around the side and you go into the boat launch area and look back across the creek, you can see some concrete structure there where they had a swimming area there. And then the Camp Drake Boy Scout camp was located there in the park where the day use area is. And they used that for the black Boy Scouts up until, integration, and then they all went to Camp Westmoreland at that point. A lot of people don't know about this history. I didn't know about this history until Wesley Cox brought it up to our attention, and he was the one that gathered all the information for this marker. His family owns the East Lauderdale News. And then the next thing that we have is the Lauderdale County Welcome Center. This is the biggest project we've ever attempted to do. We're still trying to find our way on how to do this, but we realize that there is no marker of any kind, no sign of any kind that tells you you're entering Lauderdale County from that side. When you come across Elk River, there's nothing. When you go across Elk River to Limestone County, there's one of those little green signs that says you're entering Limestone County. We don't have the same thing coming across. I mentioned that to Senator Tim Wilson, so maybe that will change, but we felt like it was an ideal place to put a little bit more than just a sign. So we decided we designed this, and when you come across Elk River, you go past the boat launch area, there's a little hill on the right-hand side, and there's a sign there already that says, "Welcome to Rogersville." Well, the state has told us we can do anything we want to with that hill. We can move dirt, we can clear trees, we can do pretty much. So I'm thankful that we've got that there. And then we've got a design now. We're going to have it doesn't really show here, but along this front wall, we're going to have Lauderdale County and hopefully some light shining on it, and have some flags. And then the back wall, those squares, are going to be plaques. We realize that when you start trying to tell the history of Lauderdale County, it's hard to get it on what one marker would be, even front and back. So we thought maybe 4 plaques, we could put the history of Lauderdale County, and then maybe also local attractions, and especially about our music history and other things that might attract tourists to our area. So this is still a ways out. We've taken some drawings that we've got and we've sent it to some contractors trying to get an estimate, not bids yet, but some estimates so that we can even see if we can find funding for it. I'm sure we're going to be in that $80,000 range, so we got to make sure we can find the funding before we can proceed on it. But Lynn Greer's on our Historical Society, and he says there's money out there. We'll find it. So I'm just trusting in him. We'll find the money to be able to do this. But I think this will be a wonderful addition to our county, and I'm also going to try to approach some of our other local organizations like the Tourism Board. I think that would be good for them to be aware of this and see if maybe they have some input too. So that is the end of my program. Thank y'all so much for listening.